Greetings, YouTube. Is death required in a game for it to have meaning? Now, I know that there are folks out there that love their grim and gritty games and that really feel that permadeath is essential to the experience. There are people that play hardcore Minecraft. So if they die once, that runs over. They got to start over again. I personally think that that is fine, but if I were to ever play Minecraft, and I don't, I would not do hardcore. In fact, I'd probably throw a mod in there to let me keep all my stuff, because the idea of having to rush back to my death spot within a time span or I lose everything would be very anxiety inducing for me. The idea of losing your stuff is a big red button in my head. Yeah, if you can tell, I have a thing with stuff. I'm getting better. I spent yesterday, part of yesterday, organizing my shop, and I've did that for 2 days in a row. So I'm getting better. Maybe someday I can organize this spot. But losing stuff bugs me. So if I were to play that game, I would not want to have that be a feature. And I can see how if you have elaborate, deep character histories and you want to have the world have a sense of permanency to it, permadeath kind of makes sense. But if you're playing really high fantasy, what does death mean within the context of the world? Can nobility come back? Or if you die as a noble, are you automatically no longer a noble? Or if you're a noble, but if you're a royal and you die, then you get bumped down to noble, but you can never be a royal again. That way you avoid the whole people coming back and living forever as a king or a duke or a duchess or what have you. But high fantasy definitely allows the possibility of returning from the dead. And I know that there are settings where that's really difficult to pull off, but there are also settings where it's dirt simple. Remember, I played first edition AD&D, and death was not an impediment to us whatsoever. If we would die, people died all the damn time. You just brought it back and they kept going. It became blasé. It was one step away from just going to a spawn point. You know what I mean? And it didn't bother us at that time. The idea that death would be permanent was alien to our way of thinking, because that would impede the fun. That would get in the way of the fun. And so if having a permanent death is something that's going to add fun to your game, then have permanent death. But if having a permanent death is something that is going to, inhibit fun, then don't have permanent death. I mean, there are games out there where the concept of permanent death make no sense, like Toon, for example. Toon, you're literally playing in a Looney Tunes world, where safes are going to fall out of the sky for no reason and flatten you into the ground like a pancake, and then someone's going to roll it off, scrape you off the ground with a spatula, flap you out until you get to be three-dimensional again, and you go on with your day. So that kind of absurdity is built into some systems. I mean, have you ever read Whole, Human Occupied Landfill, a game that is entirely handwritten? It's a thing. Some games don't take themselves all that seriously. So in my opinion, that's very much a tabletop subject. You have to get around with your players and you have to have a discussion like, what do you think death means for your character? And you don't have to have a consensus, because some people may say, okay, for me, I want my death to be important, and if it happens, I want it to be permanent. I do not want that character to come back. And if I do a good job in that particular scene, maybe I get a bonus when I come up, create my next character, something like that. And someone else may be like, I don't want to die. I want my character to continue living. So if I die, I want to be able to come back, some mechanism to come back. And you can have those two, philosophies going on at the same time. I don't think with any kind of difficulty. You could just say, okay, you die when you come back as a ghost. And the other person that died, that has permanent death, didn't. Their spirit moved on. Whereas this other person is tenaciously holding on to the mere material world and says, no, I'm not ready to go yet. There was a cyberpunk game I read years ago, and I can't remember. No, Steampunk, sorry, steampunk. I can't remember what it was called now. I don't. It could have been called steampunk. I'm not sure. I think it was an OGL, and they dealt with the idea that Ghost was a character class. You could, or a species. You could play that character. So if your character died, you can just come right back. And initially, your person may not even know they're dead until somebody points out, by the way, dude, um, your body's in a shallow grave, 3 days behind us because we didn't have time to do anything fancier and we couldn't take it with us. Um, so that to me is perfectly acceptable. That player does not want their character kicked out of the game. They don't want the anxiety of having to worry about their player dying. It's one of the reasons I don't like player currency. Class currency I don't have a problem with like grit points or key points or power points if you're psionics or for spell slots, things like that. I don't have a problem with class points. I have a problem with character points, player currency that they can use to rewrite a scene or re-roll something or change something within the game, because I as a player don't ever know when to use those. I never know when to use them, so I don't. So that means that I'm behind the power curve where other people who have a higher risk tolerance and are willing to gamble more easily with those things, they're getting more bang for their buck, literally getting more bang for their buck because they're willing to take that chance. Now I realize it's just fantasy, it's make believe, it's all in our collective heads. I get that. I still can't do it. The loss of a vital resource that I may never get back or a difficult time getting back is not something that I take lightly. I read some system recently, I don't remember what it was, where you could generate character points but only within the scene. So if you did something really well, you would generate I think it might be called stunt points that you could then use within that scene to do other effects. And to me, that was great because that's very reminiscent of action films, where the hero gets a lucky break in that moment, and then takes that lucky break and uses it to the advantage of himself and his compatriots to win that scene for them. It's not something they could plan for ahead of time. It was random chance. They just happened to get lucky in that moment, and they got something that was the edge that they didn't know they were going to have, and boom, scene's over in a gloriously, two-fisted, high fantasy kind of style. And I don't have a problem with that. But player currency, where you have some kind of hero points that you're expected to spend in a scene to modify it in that moment, I'm never going to play them. I'm going to spend them. I'm going to hoard them. Because for me, vital resources are something you don't let go. I have a hard time letting go. Okay, and it carries over into my mental space as well as my physical one. I'm getting better at it, but it doesn't mean it still isn't here in my brain, and I don't want to lose out because I'm always going to be thinking, well, I spent that point, last session that I really need now, and I don't have it. So I did the wrong thing. So now I'm down on myself for having made a decision at the moment which made sense, but now I can't do what I have to do. It's the reason I carry around a toolkit literally on my belt pouch, on my pants every day. I want to be prepared for that moment. I carry an adjustable wrench and a bit driver and a flashlight and a multi-tool everywhere I go for that reason. So for me, player currency, permanent death, the loss of something is not fun. I don't like it. And I think it's okay. You can have people who want permadeath, people who don't want permadeath in the same game at the same time, and you can make it work. I knew a guy named Rick Spoor from the old D&D group, and he actually would run a group with like a party of 6 or 7 players, and each one was playing a character from a different rules system. And he would have them all playing in the same group at the same time, and each of them was running a different rule system, and he made it work. I don't know how he made it work, but he's good enough to have turned his campaign into novels. So he must have made it work. I think one of them was a frog with a 36 strength, back in the old AD&D days. That made me smile. So let's talk about permadeath. Is it fun, or does it steal your fun away? Does it make things not fun for you? Do you consider it a detriment, or do you consider it so narratively important you cannot play in a game without it? So let's talk about death and anxiety and what we do with those kind of things when we want to sit around and pretend we're magic people in a world with dragons and wizards.